I'm Rachel Mitchell, 32, founder of Green Thread, a sustainable fashion company that's changing how people think about ethical clothing. Growing up, my family always had a knack for doubting my dreams. Get realistic, they'd say. Last Thanksgiving, my mother looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Stop pretending to be successful and get a real job." 2 weeks later, I was sitting under bright studio lights as a national business network interviewed me about my company. They had no idea that interview would change everything. Before I dive into my journey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to join me on this roller coaster ride of proving everyone wrong, even the people who were supposed to believe in you first. I grew up in Pineville, Oregon, population 2,234. It's the kind of town where practical thinking isn't just valued, it's expected. My parents, Nancy and Frank Mitchell, were hardworking, salt-of-the-earth people who believed in security above all else. Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital for 30 years, and Dad managed the town's hardware store. They raised us to believe that a steady paycheck was the ultimate goal in life. My brothers followed the family script perfectly. James, the oldest, joined the Army right out of high school and made our father burst with pride when he came home in uniform. Eric, the middle child, studied accounting and secured a position at a respected firm in Portland. Both chose paths that my parents understood and approved of: predictable, stable, and safe. Then there was me, the odd one out. From the time I was 7, I was running lemonade stands with homemade loyalty cards. By 10, I had a thriving business selling friendship bracelets I designed myself, complete with a catalog and custom orders. At 12, I organized a neighborhood service where kids could hire me and my friends to walk dogs, water plants, or help with simple tasks. I kept meticulous records of our earnings and even created a profit-sharing system that my friends thought was incredibly fair. When I proudly showed my father my bracelet business ledger, displaying a profit of $87 in 1 month, he patted my head and said, "That's cute, honey, but don't get too caught up in these little projects. School comes first." My mother would regularly donate my craft supplies to church functions without asking, explaining that this hobby was getting out of hand. During career day in 8th grade, I announced I wanted to run my own business someday. My teacher, Mrs. Lowry, was enthusiastic, but when I repeated this declaration at dinner, my mother exchanged that look with my father, the one that said, "She'll grow out of it." In high school, I started a custom t-shirt business, hand-painting designs for local events and school clubs. When orders became too numerous to handle alone, I hired 3 classmates and set up a small production system in our garage. I made enough to buy my first car without asking my parents for a dime. My father called it beginner's luck and warned me that the real world doesn't reward these kinds of wins. Despite my parents pushing me toward nursing or teaching good, stable careers for a woman, I applied to state college for business administration. My mother cried when I told her, genuinely concerned I was making a terrible mistake. "Those business types will eat you alive, Rachel. You're too nice, too creative for that cutthroat world." I graduated a semester early with honors while working part-time at a local boutique to understand retail operations from the ground up. My graduation present from my parents was a nursing school application packet, just in case. My first job out of college was at a large marketing firm in Seattle. On paper, it seemed perfect: good salary, benefits, clear advancement path. My family finally relaxed, believing I had come to my senses. But sitting in that gray cubicle, creating marketing plans for products I didn't believe in, I felt my soul slowly dying. Each day was an exercise in counting down hours until freedom. Each corporate retreat was filled with empty buzzwords that made me cringe. But I smiled, nodded, and received good performance reviews while secretly planning my escape. For 2 years, I lived well below my means, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates, bringing lunch from home, and putting aside as much of my paycheck as possible. When my coworkers splurged on designer clothes or fancy vacations, I invested in business books and online courses about sustainable manufacturing and supply chain ethics. My dating life took a backseat to my goals, which my mother pointed out at every family phone call, reminding me that my biological clock wasn't stopping for any career. During one particularly painful Christmas gathering, as we sat around the living room opening presents, my brother Eric asked about my job. Before I could answer, he turned to our cousins and said, "She's doing some marketing thing in Seattle, but it's just until she figures out what she really wants." I was 26 years old and had known exactly what I wanted since I was 7, but no one in my family could see it. When I mentioned I was considering starting my own business, the reactions ranged from dismissive chuckles to concerned glances. My Aunt Martha patted my hand and said, "Honey, security is nothing to sneeze at in this economy." My father launched into his favorite lecture about pension plans and health insurance. My mother pulled me aside later to ask if I was going through something and offered to pay for therapy. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom surrounded by the remnants of dreams my family never took seriously, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I was done trying to convince people who were determined not to believe in me. It was time to show them instead. On a drizzly Monday morning in February, I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation letter. When he asked where I was going, I straightened my shoulders and said, "I'm starting my own company." His eyebrows shot up, but he wished me luck. My colleagues threw me a goodbye happy hour, giving me a card signed with messages like, "Good luck on your adventure," and "Come back when you need a job." Their lack of faith was palpable, but at least it wasn't personal. They didn't know me like my family did. When I called my parents to tell them about quitting my job, my mother actually started crying. "Rachel, please tell me this is a joke," she said between sobs. My father got on the phone and spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "You had benefits. A 401k. What are you thinking?" Green Thread started in the corner of my living room with a simple concept: creating fashion that didn't hurt people or the planet. The fashion industry is one of the world's largest polluters, with exploitative labor practices and environmental devastation built into its standard business model. My idea was to create beautiful, durable clothing with a completely transparent supply chain that customers could actually trace from raw materials to finished product. I reconnected with my college friend Megan, who had graduated from design school and was working for a fast fashion brand she hated. Over coffee, I pitched her my vision, and her eyes lit up for the first time since I'd seen her in months. "I'm in," she said, "but I can only work evenings and weekends until this is really a thing." That same week, I reached out to Dylan, a tech expert I'd met at a business mixer who had expressed interest in supply chain transparency platforms. He agreed to build our traceability app on a deferred payment basis in exchange for equity if we succeeded. The first 6 months were brutal. I converted my second bedroom into a makeshift studio where Megan and I worked on designs. We sourced small batches of organic and recycled fabrics, paying premium prices that ate through my savings faster than I'd anticipated. Finding ethical manufacturers willing to work with our tiny production runs was nearly impossible. We eventually partnered with a family-owned factory in Los Angeles that specialized in small batch production, but their minimum orders stretched my credit cards to their limits. 3 maxed-out credit cards and 1 drained savings account later, we had our first collection, 8 pieces of mix-and-match women's workwear made from sustainable materials. They were beautiful, ethical, and horrifically expensive to produce. I still remember staring at our cost spreadsheets at 2 a.m., trying to find a way to price our products that wouldn't scare away every potential customer while still covering our costs. Our first small victory came when a boutique in Seattle agreed to take our collection on consignment. The owner, Anita, believed in what we were doing, but couldn't risk an outright purchase. "Let's see if they sell first," she said kindly. I personally delivered the carefully tagged items to her store, arranging them on the rack with trembling hands. Then I went home and refreshed my email every 5 minutes, waiting for news of our first sale. A week later, Anita called to say that 2 pieces had sold. The customers had been drawn in by the hang tags explaining each garment's journey and environmental impact. "They want to know when you'll have more," she said. I hung up the phone and danced around my apartment before immediately calling Megan to strategize about our next steps. Just as we were gaining momentum, disaster struck. Our third small batch of products developed issues after washing, the seams puckered, and the sustainable dye we'd used began to fade unevenly. Refunds and apologies consumed weeks of our time and the last of our operating capital. I was facing the very real possibility of bankruptcy before my business had even properly launched. With nowhere else to turn, I packed up my car and drove back to Pineville, moving back into my childhood bedroom at 29 years old. My parents tried to be supportive in their own way, which meant my mother leaving nursing job applications on my bed and my father explaining over breakfast why real businesses have investors and offices and how my arts and crafts project was different. Each morning, I would lock myself in my old bedroom and work frantically to salvage green thread. I sourced new sustainable fabrics, coordinated with Megan remotely, and researched dye processes that wouldn't fail. In the evenings, I'd emerge for family dinners where the conversation would inevitably turn to local job openings. Seattle Grace Hospital is looking for administrative assistants, my mother would mention casually, sliding the newspaper across the table. You've always been so organized. Henderson's Accounting, where Eric works, has a marketing position open, my father would add. Eric could put in a good word for you. My brother James, home on leave, was the only one who asked genuine questions about green thread. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, he found me working on fabric swatches at the kitchen table. "Are you sure about this, Ratch?" he asked, not unkindly. "It seems like you're killing yourself for something that might not work." I looked up at him, exhaustion etched into every line of my face. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "I just need to figure out these production issues." He nodded slowly. "Then don't let them get to you. Mom and Dad just want what they think is best for you. The problem is, they've never believed what's best for me might be different than what was best for them," I replied. Living at home while trying to save my business was like trying to heal a wound while someone repeatedly ripped off the bandage to check if it was better yet. Each day brought new suggestions about real careers and reminders about my dwindling youth. Each night I fell asleep to the sound of my own doubts, amplified by my family's concerns, wondering if maybe they were right after all. After 2 months of living at home, rebuilding green thread felt like pushing a boulder uphill. Then, seemingly by chance, everything changed on a rainy Tuesday evening at a local business mixer I almost didn't attend. The Pineville Chamber of Commerce held monthly networking events that I'd always found painfully small town. But with my business hanging by a thread, I couldn't afford to ignore any opportunity, no matter how unlikely. I put on one of my own green thread designs, a navy blazer made from recycled ocean plastic with mother-of-pearl buttons salvaged from discarded clothing, and headed to the community center. I was stirring my sad-looking punch when someone tapped my shoulder. "That's an interesting jacket. The cut is unusual, but it works beautifully." I turned to find a stylishly dressed woman in her 40s studying my blazer with an expert eye. Her name tag read Sophia Reynolds, with no company listed. "Thank you," I replied. "It's actually one of my designs. I'm trying to create sustainable workwear that doesn't look like it's made from hemp and good intentions." She laughed, a genuine, warm sound that instantly put me at ease. "Well, you've succeeded. What's your company called?" "Green Thread. We make ethical, traceable fashion with transparent supply chains." "Traceable how?" she asked, her interest clearly piqued. I pulled out my phone and showed her our prototype app, explaining how customers could scan a QR code on each garment to see exactly where each component came from, who made it, and its environmental impact. "This is precisely what the industry needs," she said, her eyes lighting up. "I've been looking for something like this for months." Only then did I think to ask what she did. Sophia, it turned out, was the regional buying director for Nordal, a high-end department store chain known for its cutting-edge approach to retail. She was visiting her hometown of Pineville while on a buying trip to the Pacific Northwest. "I'd love to see your full collection," she said, handing me her business card. "Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow?" That meeting changed everything. Over lattes the next morning, Sophia reviewed my lookbook and business plan with a keen eye, asking tough questions and taking detailed notes. At the end of our 2-hour conversation, she didn't offer to buy my collection as I'd secretly hoped. Instead, she offered something more valuable. You have something special here, Rachel, but you're making some classic early-stage mistakes. I'd like to mentor you, help you refine your approach. And when you're ready, I'll introduce you to some investors I know who focus on sustainable businesses. For the next 3 months, I worked under Sophia's guidance, revamping our business model and streamlining our product line. She taught me about proper costing, sustainable scaling, and how to pitch to investors who cared about both profit and impact. With her connections, I secured meetings with potential investors that would have been impossible otherwise. My pitch presentation evolved from a passionate but disorganized plea into a compelling business case for ethical fashion. On a warm June morning, I stood before a panel of 5 investors in a Seattle conference room, wearing a green thread outfit and carrying samples of our materials. The fashion industry produces 20% of global wastewater and 10% of global carbon emissions. I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. At Green Thread, we're proving that style doesn't have to come at the expense of our planet or the people who make our clothes. By the end of that meeting, we had secured $250,000 in initial funding, enough to move operations out of my bedroom and into a small warehouse space, improve our production processes, and bring Megan on full-time as our design director. Our breakthrough fabric innovation came 2 months later. Working with a textile engineer who had reached out after seeing our website, we developed a process for creating luxurious-feeling fabric from agricultural waste fibers that had previously been considered unusable. This proprietary material, which we named Regan, cost 40% less to produce than our previous sustainable fabrics, while being more durable and attractive. With Regan as our signature material, we relaunched Green Thread with a focused digital marketing strategy. Instead of trying to compete with mainstream fashion advertising budgets, we created video content showcasing the journey of each garment from waste material to finished product. These clothing origin stories cost almost nothing to produce, but resonated deeply with conscious consumers. Our first video, shot on my smartphone and edited by Dylan, showed how discarded pineapple leaves became a stunning executive-ready blazer. It was shared over 50,000 times across social platforms. The turning point in our retail strategy came when Copper Plus Sage, a boutique chain with locations in eco-conscious neighborhoods across the West Coast, placed our first significant wholesale order. Their founder, Layla Barnes, had seen our viral content and reached out directly. "Your transparency approach is exactly what my customers have been asking for," she said during our initial call. "They want to know the full story behind what they wear, not just vague claims about being green or ethical." That first order was for 200 pieces across 15 stores, small by industry standards, but transformative for Green Thread. It gave us the stability to refine our production processes and the credibility to approach other retailers. When I called my parents to share the news about our investment funding and first major retail partnership, their reaction was notably muted. "Well, that's nice, dear," my mother said after an awkward pause. "But is it sustainable?" The irony of her word choice was not lost on me. My brother Eric, who had been the most vocal critic of my playing business, switched from mockery to confused silence. At Sunday dinner during my next visit home, when I excused myself to take a call from a potential retail partner, he muttered, "When did she start taking herself so seriously?" Only James showed genuine interest, pulling me aside after dinner to ask thoughtful questions about our growth strategy and supply chain. "I might not understand all the fashion stuff," he admitted, "but it sounds like you're really building something real here." As Green Thread gained traction, I made the decision to relocate to Seattle permanently. The small-town constraints of Pineville, both logistical and psychological, were holding us back. We needed to be closer to our production partners, shipping facilities, and the creative talent pool that would help us grow. The day I packed my car to leave, my mother stood in the driveway with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I just want you to be secure, Rachel," she said, handing me a container of homemade cookies. "All this business stuff seems so precarious." I hugged her, understanding that her doubt came from love, however misguided. "Sometimes security means building something yourself instead of depending on someone else's company," I replied. "I'm creating my own security, Mom." As I drove away, Watching my childhood home recede in the rearview mirror, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time, I wasn't running away from my family's doubts. I was moving toward a future that finally felt entirely my own. 2 years after that pivotal investment meeting, Green Thread had transformed from a struggling startup into a growing ethical fashion brand. Our warehouse space, once cavernously empty, now buzzed with activity as our team of 15 employees worked to fulfill orders from over 30 retail partners across the country. Our revenue had crossed the 7-figure threshold, a milestone that had once seemed impossibly distant. The business magazine Entrepreneur Now had profiled us in their annual Sustainability Leaders issue, featuring a photo of me standing amid rolls of our signature Regan fabric. The headline read, "Rachel Mitchell's Green Thread weaves profit with purpose." Despite our growing success, I maintained a modest lifestyle, reinvesting most of our profits back into the company. My apartment, while no longer shared with roommates, was small and functional rather than luxurious. My wardrobe consisted almost exclusively of Green Thread samples and prototypes. Every extra dollar went toward improving our products, refining our manufacturing processes, or developing new sustainable materials. Our team had expanded thoughtfully, each new hire chosen not just for their skills, but for their commitment to our mission. Dylan, now our full-time CTO, had built our traceability platform into an industry-leading tool that other sustainable brands were asking to license. Megan led a small design team creating seasonal collections that were both timeless and contemporary. We'd added specialists in sustainable supply chain management, ethical manufacturing, and conscious marketing. The watershed moment for our brand recognition came when actress and environmental activist Kayla James wore our evergreen suit to accept her award at the Environmental Media Awards. When asked about her outfit on the green carpet, she spoke passionately about Green Thread's mission and held up her phone to show reporters our traceability app displaying the journey of her suit from agricultural waste to red carpet-ready attire. Orders surged overnight, crashing our website and depleting our inventory within hours. The team worked around the clock to catch up while maintaining our quality standards. It was exhausting but exhilarating. Tangible proof that our vision was resonating with a wider audience than ever before. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt a mix of dread and determination about returning home. My success was becoming difficult for even my most skeptical family members to dismiss, but that seemed to be making the dynamics even more complicated rather than less. The holiday gathering that year took place at my brother Eric's newly purchased suburban home, a testament to his own professional success. His wife Kristen had decorated impeccably, creating the picture-perfect Thanksgiving setting complete with hand-lettered place cards and a professionally photographed family portrait hanging above the fireplace. I arrived late due to a last-minute call with an international shipping partner, apologizing as I hurried through the door with a bottle of wine and a pie from my favorite Seattle bakery. My mother greeted me with her standard critical once-over. "You look tired, Rachel," she said, smoothing her own perfectly coiffed hair. "Are you sleeping enough? Running yourself ragged with this business of yours?" Before I could answer, my father joined us, giving me a brief hug. "So, how long do these internet fashion things usually last?" I read that most of these trendy companies fold after a few years when people move on to the next thing. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that engaging defensively would only make the day more difficult. "We're not really a trend, Dad. Sustainability isn't a fad, it's a necessary evolution of the industry." Eric appeared from the kitchen, martini in hand. Well, if it isn't Seattle's fashion mogul," he said with a smirk. "Slumming it with the regular folks this holiday." Throughout dinner, the conversation repeatedly circled back to what my family clearly perceived as my temporary success. My mother mentioned her friend's daughter, who had tried that entrepreneur thing before wisely returning to corporate law. My father discussed the volatile retail industry, citing statistics about business failure rates that he'd apparently researched specifically for this occasion. The tension reached its peak during dessert when Eric, emboldened by several glasses of wine, decided to offer his unsolicited business advice. "You know, Rachel, you should really consider selling while you're ahead," he said, cutting into his pumpkin pie. These sustainability trends come and go. Cash out before the bubble bursts. I set down my fork carefully. It's not a bubble, Eric. Our revenue has grown steadily for 8 consecutive quarters. Lucky timing, my father interjected with a dismissive wave. You caught the green wave, but consumers are fickle. They'll move on to the next thing. Our customer retention rate is 78%, I countered. That's nearly double the industry average. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand in a way that made me feel like a child. Honey, it's wonderful that you're having this little success. We're proud of you for trying. But maybe don't get too caught up in it all. You don't want to be devastated when things change. Change is inevitable in business, I acknowledged. That's why we're constantly innovating and… Rachel, she interrupted, her voice taking on that particular tone she reserved for what she considered much-needed reality checks. You need to stop pretending to be successful and think about your long-term security. You're 31 now. Have you thought about what happens if this all falls apart? The table fell silent. The words hung in the air, cutting deeper than she probably intended. After years of hard work, sacrifices, and proven success, my own mother was still treating my business as a childish fantasy rather than the thriving company it had become. I'm not pretending anything, Mom, I said quietly. Green Thread is successful by any objective measure. We employ 15 people. We're profitable. We're growing. Yes, but, she began. There's no but, I said, pushing back my chair and standing up. I've spent my entire life having my ambitions dismissed by this family. I thought actually succeeding would finally earn some respect, but apparently nothing I accomplish will ever be enough for you. Eric scoffed, rolling his eyes. Always so dramatic. This is exactly what we mean about putting on airs. Success has gone to your head. Success hasn't gone to my head, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. But your constant undermining has gone to my heart for decades. I excused myself and stepped outside onto Eric's back porch, breathing in the cold November air. James followed a few minutes later, offering a sympathetic smile and a fresh glass of wine. They're proud of you, you know, he said after a moment of silence. They just don't know how to show it. I laughed softly, without humor. They're not proud, James. They're waiting for me to fail so they can say they were right all along. He didn't argue, which told me everything I needed to know. The remainder of my visit was mercifully short. I left the next morning with a hollow feeling in my chest, wondering if family approval was a prize I should stop running toward. On the flight back to Seattle, I decided to channel my emotional energy into work instead of seeking validation from people determined not to give it. Back in Seattle, I threw myself into expanding Green Thread with renewed determination. As if the universe were confirming my choice, I met Marcus Chin at a sustainable business conference the following week. As the founder of an eco-friendly packaging company, he understood the challenges and rewards of building a mission-driven business in a traditionally wasteful industry. Our first date lasted 6 hours, conversation flowing effortlessly from business ethics to childhood dreams to favorite hikes in the Pacific Northwest. For the first time, I was with someone who saw my ambition as an asset rather than a liability, who asked about my company with genuine curiosity rather than thinly veiled skepticism. My family thinks I'm crazy too, he confided over our third cup of coffee. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. They still introduce me as their son who does something with boxes instead of saying I own a successful packaging company. We laughed together, the relief of shared understanding creating an instant bond. As winter turned to spring, Marcus became not just my partner, but my strongest supporter, understanding the late nights and early mornings that came with running a growing company. With my personal life finally feeling as aligned as my professional one, I made the difficult decision to create some distance from my family. I called less frequently, kept conversations brief and superficial, and declined the next few invitations to family gatherings. It hurt, but the space allowed me to focus on the people and work that nurtured rather than depleted me. My brother James noticed the shift and reached out with concern. Everyone's wondering why you've been so scarce, he said during one of our occasional phone calls. I needed some space to grow without constant criticism, I explained. They miss you, he said simply. I miss the family I wish we could be, I replied. The one that celebrates each other's different versions of success instead of trying to force everyone into the same mold. He was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is incredible. And I'm not just saying that because you're my sister. It wasn't complete family acceptance, but it was a start. One person in my family who could see me clearly. For now, that would have to be enough. 3 years into building Green Thread, just as we seemed to be hitting our stride, disaster struck without warning. I was reviewing applications for 3 new positions we needed to fill when my phone rang with our supply chain manager's number. "Rachel, we have a problem," Tara said, her normally calm voice tight with tension. "Ecofiber just called. They're backing out of our contract. Effective immediately." My blood ran cold. Ecofiber was our primary supplier of the specialized sustainable materials we used in 70% of our products. Without them, our production would grind to a halt within weeks. "They can't do that." "We have a contract," I said, already pulling up the document on my computer. "They've been acquired by Vantage Textiles," Tara explained. "The new parent company is redirecting all production to their existing clients. They're invoking the change of ownership clause in paragraph 22. I stared at the clause I'd barely noticed when signing the contract, a standard legal provision that suddenly threatened everything we'd built. Vantage Textiles was a supplier for fast fashion giants, the exact opposite of everything Green Thread stood for. "We've got maybe 3 weeks of materials in stock, plus whatever is currently in transit," Tara continued. "After that, we're looking at a complete production stoppage unless we find an alternative." The next 48 hours became a blur of emergency meetings, frantic calls to potential alternate suppliers, and sleepless nights crunching numbers. The harsh reality quickly became clear. No other supplier could match Ecofiber's combination of quality, sustainability credentials, and price point. The alternatives would either compromise our ethical standards or increase our costs by 30 to 40%, making our already premium-priced products virtually unsellable. Word spread quickly through the industry. Fashionista.com published an article titled "Sustainability Pioneer Green Thread Faces Supply Chain Crisis," which was picked up by larger business publications. Our retail partners started calling, concerned about their orders. Competitors watched like vultures, ready to swoop in on our retail relationships if we couldn't deliver. The stress manifested physically. I developed insomnia, lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks, and started finding strands of gray hair at my temples despite being only 32. The team tried to maintain morale, but the tension was palpable as everyone wondered if their jobs were in jeopardy. In the midst of this crisis, my family chose the worst possible moment to renew their skepticism campaign. An email from my mother arrived with the subject line, "Just saw this," and contained a link to a job listing for a marketing director at a large Seattle company, along with the message, "Thought this might be of interest given the circumstances. Love, Mom." My brother Eric was less subtle. "Heard about your supplier problems," his text read. "Tough break. Let me know if you need help with your resume." Those gaps in employment can be tricky to explain to hiring managers. Only James called to actually ask how I was doing and what the situation meant. When I explained the complexity of the crisis, he listened without immediately offering solutions or saying I should have seen it coming. "That sounds incredibly stressful," he said simply. "What's your next move?" It was a good question, one I asked myself hourly as I explored every possible path forward. Switching suppliers would mean compromising on quality or ethics. Maintaining our standards would require price increases that would alienate our customers. Developing new materials would take months we didn't have. After a particularly disheartening meeting with potential alternative suppliers, I found myself sitting alone in our conference room at 10 p.m., spreadsheets open on my laptop, half-eaten takeout containers pushed to the side. The weight of 15 employees' livelihoods plus my own invested savings and reputation felt crushing. For one dark moment, I wondered if my family had been right all along. Maybe this had been an unsustainable dream. Maybe I should start polishing my resume and preparing to rejoin the corporate world with my tail between my legs. Then I remembered something my first mentor Sophia had told me. The difference between successful entrepreneurs and failed ones often comes down to what they do when facing what seems like an impossible problem. I closed the spreadsheets and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "What if we didn't need external suppliers at all?" The idea that began to form was radical and risky: vertical integration. Instead of finding another supplier, what if Green Thread became its own supplier by acquiring a small sustainable fabric mill? I knew of a family-owned operation in Oregon that specialized in innovative natural fibers. They were small but skilled, with proprietary techniques for creating luxury-quality fabrics from agricultural waste. They had been struggling financially after their largest client moved production overseas. The next morning, I called Thomas Green, the mill's 70-year-old owner, and proposed a meeting. 3 days later, I was touring his facility, marveling at the craftsmanship and technology that combined traditional weaving methods with cutting-edge sustainable practices. "We've been following what you're doing at Green Thread," Thomas told me as we watched the looms in action. "Not many companies truly care about both the environmental and human sides of the equation the way you do." His daughter Catherine, who managed their operations, was equally enthusiastic. "We've wanted to expand our regenerative fiber program for years, but we haven't had the capital or the guaranteed buyer to justify the investment." By the end of the visit, a potential solution had crystallized. Green Thread would acquire the mill, providing an injection of capital to expand their innovative processes while securing our supply chain. It was perfect in theory, but required an investment far beyond our current resources. Back in Seattle, I assembled our board of advisors and key team members to pitch what I called Operation Vertical. The response was mixed, with legitimate concerns about taking on such significant risk during an already precarious time. "This is betting the entire company," Dylan warned. "If it doesn't work, we lose everything." "If we do nothing, we lose everything anyway," I countered. "At least this way we control our destiny." With the team conditionally on board, I began the arduous process of seeking second-round funding during a crisis, possibly the worst timing imaginable. Most investors we approached were interested in our growth story, but balked at the idea of funding what they saw as a risky acquisition during a supply chain emergency. One particularly blunt venture capitalist told me, "I invest in solutions, not problems. Come back when this situation is resolved." Each rejection made the next pitch meeting harder to face. I started having panic attacks before investor calls, my heart racing and palms sweating as I tried to project confidence despite my growing desperation. The deadline loomed closer. We had enough materials for perhaps 10 more days of production. I'd already had the painful conversation with our team about potential temporary layoffs if we couldn't resolve the situation quickly. Seeing the fear in their eyes, people who had believed in our mission enough to join a young and proven company, was gutting. Our salvation came from an unexpected source. Catherine Green, the mill owner's daughter, had connections with an impact investment fund that specialized in sustainable supply chain solutions. She made an introduction, and within 48 hours, I was in a conference room making the most important pitch of my life. The meeting was tense, with pointed questions about contingency plans, integration challenges, and realistic timelines. The lead investor, a former manufacturing executive named Patricia Winters, was particularly focused on the technical aspects of the mill's operations. "This isn't just about securing your materials," she noted. "You're talking about becoming a manufacturer when your expertise is in design and retail. That's a significant capability gap." "Which is why the Green family would remain in operational leadership of the mill," I explained. "We're not presuming to know more about fabric production than people with 3 generations of experience. What we bring is market access, brand value, and growth capital." After 4 hours of discussion and 2 days of excruciating waiting, the fund approved an investment of $3.5 million, enough to acquire the mill, update its equipment, and provide working capital during the transition. The terms were tougher than our first funding round, diluting my ownership significantly, but it was the lifeline we needed. The acquisition closed in record time, driven by necessity on both sides. Our first joint production run shipped just as our existing inventory was depleted. We had literally no margin for error, but somehow, we made it work. The weeks that followed were among the most challenging of my professional life. Integrating two companies while simultaneously ramping up production required 18-hour days, constant troubleshooting, and more coffee than should be humanly possible to consume. I missed my cousin's wedding, a close friend's birthday, and numerous family events, earning disapproving texts and voicemails with each absence. "Your brother Eric's promotion celebration was yesterday," my mother's message said. "Everyone asked where you were. I didn't know what to say since you never respond to family anymore. I hope whatever you're doing is worth missing these important moments." It was a knife twist of guilt at a time when I was already stretched to my breaking point. But the alternative, letting 15 people lose their jobs and watching my life's work collapse, wasn't an option I could accept. As the acquisition began to stabilize, the benefits of our vertical integration became apparent. With direct control over our materials, we could innovate faster, customize more effectively, and ultimately reduce costs while improving quality. What had begun as an emergency solution was evolving into a significant competitive advantage. Industry publications that had been predicting our demise now wrote features on our innovative supply chain strategy. Our retail partners, impressed by our resilience and transparent communication throughout the crisis, deepened their commitments. 3 major competitors inquired about purchasing our excess fabric production, creating a new revenue stream we hadn't anticipated. 6 months after the crisis began, Green Thread wasn't just surviving, we were stronger than before. Our valuation had increased, our products were better, and our mission more secure. The team that had weathered the storm together had developed a bond that transcended typical workplace relationships. I finally took a weekend off, spending it with Marcus at a quiet cabin on the Olympic Peninsula. As we sat watching the sunset over the water, he asked the question I'd been too busy to consider. "Are you going to tell your family how you saved your company against impossible odds?" I thought about the months of missed calls, the dismissive messages, the constant undercurrent of "just wait until it fails" in every family interaction. "They wouldn't understand," I said finally. To them, this was just another example of me being impractical and taking unnecessary risks. "Maybe it's time to stop hoping they'll understand and just live your life on your terms," he suggested gently. It was simple advice, but profound in its impact. For years, I'd been performing for an audience that wasn't even watching the right stage. Perhaps it was time to stop seeking applause from people determined to misunderstand the show. When I returned to Seattle, I made a decision. I would continue creating appropriate boundaries with my family, focusing my energy on the business and relationships that supported rather than undermined me. It wasn't about cutting them off, but about reallocating my emotional resources to where they would do the most good. I didn't know then that my resolution would soon be tested in the most unexpected way, thrusting both my business and family dynamics into an uncomfortably bright spotlight. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, sandwiched between production updates and meeting reminders. The subject line read, "Interview request, Eco-Style Spotlight Series, Biz Network." I nearly deleted it, assuming it was a pitch for paid promotional content like the dozens we received weekly. Curiosity made me open it instead, and my heart skipped as I read the message. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, Biz Network's Eco-Style series is featuring innovative leaders in sustainable fashion for our upcoming primetime special. Your work with Green Thread has caught our producers' attention, particularly your recent vertical integration strategy and transparency initiatives. We'd like to invite you for an in-studio interview segment during the week of March 15th. Biz Network was no small platform, it was a major business news channel with millions of viewers. Their Eco-Style special was an annual feature that regularly launched featured companies into the national spotlight. Previous participants had secured major investment deals, retail partnerships, and game-changing exposure. I immediately forwarded the email to our marketing director, Julia, with a simple, "Is this legit?" Her response came back minutes later, 100% legit. "This is huge. Please tell me you're saying yes." After verifying that the request was indeed genuine, I accepted the invitation with a mix of excitement and trepidation. While the exposure would be invaluable for Green Thread, I'd always been more comfortable working behind the scenes than in front of cameras. Public speaking had never been my forte. I'd once nearly fainted during a high school debate competition. Julia immediately arranged for media training sessions with a former broadcast journalist who now coached executives for television appearances. The first session was brutally enlightening. You're slouching, speaking too quickly, and qualifying everything with phrases like sort of and kind of, my coach, Deborah, noted after watching my practice responses. You're undermining your authority with every sentence. For the next 2 weeks, I spent every spare moment preparing. We developed concise answers to potential questions, practiced speaking at the right pace, and worked on body language that projected confidence without arrogance. Deborah recorded each session, forcing me to watch myself and confront my nervous habits. Stop apologizing for your success, she said during our final session. You built something remarkable. Own it without qualification. It was advice that struck deeper than just media training. For years, I downplayed my accomplishments around my family to avoid seeming boastful or triggering their skepticism. That habit had seeped into my professional demeanor as well. The viewers don't want to see someone who's uncertain, Deborah continued. They want to see the confident entrepreneur who saved her company with a bold vertical integration strategy. Be that person. The morning of the interview, I was reviewing my talking points when my phone rang. James's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Rach. Just wanted to wish you luck today. Mom mentioned you're doing some TV thing. I hadn't told my parents about the interview directly, but I'd mentioned it to James last week. Apparently, he'd shared the information. Thanks. It's for a business news channel, nothing major, I said, automatically minimizing the opportunity out of habit. Well, Dad's setting up the DVR, and they're having the neighbors over to watch. So, no pressure or anything, he added with a chuckle. My stomach dropped. They're doing what? Yeah, Mom's making her famous artichoke dip and everything. The whole neighborhood watch party thing. But they've never even seen the company website. Dad still calls it green string half the time. I think they're excited in their way, James said. Though Eric made some comment about hoping you don't embarrass yourself on national television. I told him to shut up, if that helps. It didn't help. In fact, knowing my family would be scrutinizing every word and gesture added a layer of anxiety I definitely didn't need. Now I would be performing for both a national audience and the most critical viewers of all, the people who had been waiting for me to fail since I was 7 years old. When I arrived at the studio, my palms were sweating so badly I had to wipe them on my slacks before shaking hands with the producer. The makeup artist commented on my pallor as she attempted to add some color to my cheeks. First time on TV, she asked kindly, applying powder to my forehead. Don't worry, honey. Everyone's terrified their first time. Just remember they can edit out the worst bits. That's not actually reassuring, I said with a nervous laugh. Well, then remember this. In 6 months, no one will remember if you stumble over a word, but they will remember if you have something important to say. So focus on your message, not your delivery. That simple advice centered me more than all the technical tips from my media training. I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was there, to share Green Thread's story and mission, not to prove anything to my family. The set was smaller than it appeared on television, with bright lights and multiple cameras positioned at different angles. The host, Vanessa Rivera, was known for her sharp questions but fair approach. She greeted me warmly as a production assistant clipped a microphone to my collar. We've been following your company's journey, she said as we took our seats. Especially that supplier crisis last year. Very impressive turnaround. Thank you, I replied, remembering Deborah's coaching. No qualifiers, no minimizing. We're living 5, 4, 3. The floor director counted down silently with fingers for the final 2 seconds, and suddenly the red camera light illuminated. Welcome back to EcoStyle's Spotlight series, Vanessa began, turning to the camera with practiced ease. Today we're talking with Rachel Mitchell, founder and CEO of Green Thread, an innovative sustainable fashion company that's rewriting the rules of ethical clothing production. Rachel, thank you for joining us. The interview began with standard questions about Green Thread's founding and mission, familiar territory that helped calm my nerves. As we moved into discussing the supply chain crisis and our vertical integration solution, I found myself speaking with unexpected fluency about the challenges and strategic decisions. Many industry analysts predicted GreenThread wouldn't survive when your main supplier was acquired, Vanessa noted. Yet not only did you survive, but you turned the crisis into an opportunity. Walk us through that decision process. I explained our acquisition of the Green family mill, the rapid integration of their expertise with our market access, and how the crisis had ultimately strengthened our business model. To my surprise, the words flowed naturally, without the hesitation or qualifying phrases Deborah had worked so hard to eliminate from my speech. That's a significant risk during an already precarious time, Vanessa observed. What gave you the confidence to make such a bold move when conventional wisdom would suggest battening down the hatches? The question struck at the heart of my entrepreneurial journey. For a moment, I thought about giving a safe, business school answer about calculated risks and strategic pivots. Instead, I decided to be honest. When you've spent your entire life being told that your dreams are impractical or unlikely to succeed, you develop an interesting relationship with risk, I said. I learned early that the people who discourage you from taking chances are often the same people who have never taken chances themselves. They're speaking from fear, not experience. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, recognizing she'd touched on something deeper than business strategy. And who were those people in your case? I hesitated, aware that my family was watching. But the truth was the truth. Often it was the people closest to me, family, who wanted security for me, but didn't understand that my definition of security included fulfillment and purpose, not just a steady paycheck. The conversation shifted to GreenThread's innovations in fabric technology and transparency practices, but I could tell that my personal revelation had caught Vanessa's interest. As we approached the final segment, she circled back to it. Before we wrap up, I'd like to return to something you mentioned earlier about being discouraged from pursuing your vision. GreenThread is now valued at approximately $25 million, with projections to double that in the next 18 months, and your traceability platform is being licensed to other ethical brands. What would you say to those people who doubted you now? The camera zoomed in, and I knew this would be the clip that would be shared and replayed. My family was watching. Future investors were watching. My team was watching. I took a deep breath. I would say that doubt often says more about the doubter than the dreamer, I replied, meeting Vanessa's gaze steadily. But I would also say thank you, because that doubt created a resilience in me that made it possible to weather the real challenges of entrepreneurship. When your supply chain collapses or your funding falls through, having already practiced standing firm in your vision despite criticism becomes an unexpected superpower. Vanessa smiled. That's an incredibly generous perspective. One final question. GreenThread is clearly on an impressive trajectory. What's next for you and the company? I shared our plans for international expansion, our new regenerative fiber research, and our goals for the traceability platform. As the segment concluded, Vanessa thanked me for my time, and the red camera light switched off. That was excellent, she said once we were off air, removing her microphone. Especially that part about doubt being a superpower. Very quotable. As I left the studio, my phone buzzed with messages from the team and Marcus, all enthusiastic about how the interview had gone. There was nothing from my family yet, but I knew they had been watching. For better or worse, they had witnessed not just the success of GreenThread, but my unfiltered thoughts about their lack of support throughout the years. On the taxi ride back to my hotel, I felt a strange mixture of vulnerability and liberation. I hadn't planned to expose those private family dynamics on national television, but there was something cathartic about finally speaking my truth publicly. Whatever happened next with my family, I had stood in my power and owned my journey without qualification or apology. Little did I know that the interview would trigger a long-overdue confrontation that would forever change my family's dynamics and my relationship with my own success. The interview aired on a Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. I declined invitations to watch with the team or with Marcus, needing space to process whatever emotions might surface. Instead, I ordered room service to my hotel suite and sat alone as the segment began. Seeing myself on national television was surreal. The woman on screen looked like me but somehow more polished, more authoritative. She spoke with confidence about supply chains, sustainable innovation, and business strategy. The producers had added graphics showing GreenThread's growth metrics and valuation, alongside footage of our production facility and products. It looked impressive, professional, legitimate. When the interviewer asked about dealing with doubters, my heart rate quickened. My on-screen self paused briefly before delivering that unplanned answer about doubt, revealing more about the doubter than the dreamer. I held my breath, wondering if I'd gone too far. As the segment concluded, my phone exploded with notifications. LinkedIn messages from industry contacts, texts from friends, emails from retail partners and potential investors. All positive, many effusive in their praise. My social media notifications had reached the point where they simply read +99 across every platform. Conspicuously absent from this deluge were messages from my family. I checked my call log repeatedly, but nothing appeared. Part of me was relieved, but another part felt a pang of disappointment. Despite everything, some childish part of me had hoped they would finally see what I had built and be proud. Around midnight, as the initial flood of messages subsided, a text finally came through from James. "You killed it, Ratch. Really impressive. Call me tomorrow when you have a minute." That was it, the sum total of my family's response to my national television debut and the public revelation of our company's $25 million valuation. I fell into an uneasy sleep, wondering if I had permanently damaged already strained relationships. The next morning brought meetings with potential investors who had reached out after the broadcast, followed by a strategy session with our marketing team about leveraging the exposure. Our website traffic had increased by 3,000%, and retail inquiries were flooding in faster than our sales team could process them. In the midst of this controlled chaos, my assistant poked her head into my office around 2 p.m. "Rachel, your family is here." "My family?" I repeated blankly. "Here?" "As in the office. Your parents and 2 men I'm assuming are your brothers? They're in reception and asking to see you. They don't have an appointment, but I thought." My mind raced. My family had never visited my company. Not when we moved into our first real office, not when we launched our flagship collection, not when we were featured in major publications. Now they had shown up unannounced, the day after my interview aired nationally. "Tell them I'll be out in 5 minutes," I said, needing a moment to compose myself. I texted Marcus quickly. "Family showed up at office. Pray for me." His response was immediate. "Want me to come?" "Can be there in 15. "No, better handle this alone. We'll call after." Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my skirt, checked my reflection in my phone screen, and walked out to reception with as much calm as I could muster. They looked out of place among our sleek, minimalist decor, my father in his practical button-down shirt and khakis, my mother clutching her oversized purse, Eric in business casual that somehow managed to look stiff, and James offering a small, encouraging smile. "This is a surprise," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "What brings you all to Seattle?" "We saw your interview," my father stated flatly, as if that explained everything. "We thought we should come see this company of yours in person," my mother added. "Since you're too busy to visit us these days." Eric stood with arms crossed, surveying the reception area with a critical eye. "Nice digs. Very trendy." Only James approached with genuine warmth, giving me a quick hug. "Sorry for the ambush," he whispered. "It was their idea, and I thought it might be better if I came along too." Deciding it was better to control the situation than have them lingering in reception where staff could overhear, I gestured toward our main workspace. "Would you like a tour?" Leading my family through the office was like watching 2 different movies simultaneously. The physical space, our open concept design area with sustainable materials library, the technology hub where Dylan and his team worked on the traceability platform, the conference room with its wall of industry awards and press mentions, all told the story of a thriving, innovative company. But my family moved through this space like visitors in a foreign country, observing with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed disbelief. My mother touched fabric samples tentatively, as if they might disintegrate. My father nodded mechanically as I explained our vertically integrated supply chain model, clearly not following the industry terminology. All these people work for you, he asked as we passed through the main office area where about 20 employees were busy at their desks or in small collaborative groups. Yes, we have 27 full-time employees now, plus about 15 at the mill in Oregon, I replied. And you're the boss? The question came with such genuine surprise that several nearby team members glanced up. Yes, Dad. I'm the founder and CEO. I'm their boss. He nodded again, that same mechanical movement, but something shifted in his expression, the first crack in the facade of polite skepticism. The tour concluded at our main conference room, where I suggested we could sit and talk privately. As the door closed behind us, an awkward silence descended. I waited, determined not to fill the void with nervous chatter or unnecessary justifications. Finally, my father cleared his throat. That woman on TV said your company is worth $25 million. Is that true? The valuation is accurate, yes, I replied, maintaining eye contact. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, her voice somewhere between hurt and accusatory. I've been telling you about the company's growth for years, I said carefully. But you've never seemed particularly interested in the details. Well, we didn't know it was this significant, she replied. Eric, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the tour, finally spoke up. So are you selling? Cashing out while it's hot? Of course that would be his first question. How to convert the vision into something practical like money. No, I'm not selling. We're expanding internationally next quarter and developing new proprietary materials. The company has tremendous growth ahead. But you could sell, he pressed. Take the money and be set for life. I studied my brother's face, recognizing the calculation behind his eyes. He was trying to translate my success into terms he understood: liquid assets, nest eggs, retirement funds. I didn't build this company to sell it, Eric. I built it to change how clothing is made and consumed. The mission is the point, not just the money. He scoffed lightly. Very noble. But 25 million is 25 million. Why are you really here? I asked, cutting to the chase. You've never shown interest in visiting before. My mother looked hurt. We're your family, Rachel. Of course we'd want to see your business. She stumbled slightly over the last word, as if still uncomfortable acknowledging that what I was doing qualified as a real business. After 4 years, you suddenly decided to fly to Seattle unannounced, the day after my national television interview? Why no? My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We may not have been as supportive as we could have been. It was perhaps the closest thing to an admission of doubt I had ever heard from him. I waited for more, but he seemed to think this statement sufficient. What your father means, my mother interjected, is that we always knew you were capable. We just worried about you entering such a competitive industry with no experience. That's what parents do, we worry. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, disbelieving sound. Mom, you told me to stop pretending to be successful literally the last time we were all together. Those were your exact words. I never said that, she protested, then paused. Did I? I meant you shouldn't get ahead of yourself. Success can be fleeting in these trendy industries. It's not trendy, Mom. Sustainability isn't a trend, it's a necessary evolution of an industry that's been environmentally destructive for decades. And green thread isn't a fluke or a lucky break. It's the result of years of work, strategic decisions, and perseverance despite constant discouragement, much of it from this family. Eric rolled his eyes. Here we go with the dramatic victim narrative again. It's not a narrative, Eric, James interrupted, surprising everyone. We've all been pretty dismissive of Rachel's business. I've sat at the same dinner tables you have, heard the same comments. Eric turned to him, betrayal written across his face. Whose side are you on? It's not about sides, James replied calmly. It's about acknowledging reality. We did doubt her. We did discourage her. And she succeeded anyway. Maybe it's time we simply said congratulations instead of looking for ways to minimize what she's built. A heavy silence fell over the room. My father stared at the conference table, tracing a finger along its surface. My mother clutched her purse a little tighter. Eric looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. I didn't come here for an apology, I said finally. I've made peace with the fact that my path isn't one you understand or value in the same way I do. But I would appreciate some basic respect for what I've accomplished, even if it's not the life you would have chosen for me." My father looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "The valuation, it's real? Not some investor hype or paper money. It's real, Dad. We're profitable, growing, and changing our industry. The numbers are solid." He nodded, something like grudging respect flickering across his features. Then I was wrong. Not about being concerned, parents are always concerned, but about your ability to make this work. You've clearly succeeded. The words seemed difficult for him to say, decades of caution making it stick in his throat. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand in that maternal way that had always felt simultaneously comforting and dismissive. "I always knew you were special, Rachel. You get your determination from me, you know." I almost laughed at this abrupt rewriting of history, but I bit my tongue. If taking credit for my success was her way of coming to terms with it, perhaps that was a step forward from denying it entirely. Eric remained the holdout, arms crossed defensively. "So what? We're supposed to just forget all the family events you missed while building this empire? The times you chose work over relationships?" There it was, the real issue behind his resistance. In his mind, my success had come at the expense of family obligations, appending the unspoken hierarchy where his traditional choices positioned him as the responsible one. "I missed those events because I was fighting to keep this company alive during a crisis," I replied evenly. "Just like you've missed events for work emergencies. The difference is that your work emergencies were considered valid, while mine were seen as self-inflicted problems from a hobby business." He flinched slightly at the accuracy of the assessment. "I'm not asking you to forget anything, Eric. I'm asking for the same respect you'd give to any successful business leader you'd read about in your financial journals. The fact that I'm your sister shouldn't make my achievements less legitimate." James, ever the peacemaker, stepped in again. "I think what we're all dancing around here is that family dynamics are complex. We got comfortable with certain roles, Eric the responsible one, me the steady one, Rachel the dreamer. When those roles shift dramatically, it's disorienting for everyone." "That's very insightful, James," my mother said, clearly relieved at the diplomatic framing. "The question is," he continued, "can we adapt to this new reality? Can we celebrate Rachel's success without feeling threatened by it? Can we build relationships based on who we are now, not who we were growing up?" The question hung in the air, challenging and unavoidable. My father was the first to respond, in his characteristically direct way. "I'm proud of what you've built," he said simply. "I may not understand all the details, but $25 million and national television don't lie. You proved me wrong, and that's okay." Coming from my father, this statement was the equivalent of an emotional soliloquy. I felt something tight unravel slightly in my chest. "Thank you, Dad." My mother, not to be outdone, added, "We were just trying to protect you from disappointment." "That's a mother's job. But clearly you didn't need protection after all." Eric remained silent, his internal struggle playing out visibly as he glanced around the conference room at the tangible evidence of success he could no longer deny. "I might be interested in learning more about the investment potential in sustainable businesses," he said finally, retreating to his comfort zone of financial analysis. "If you ever need accounting expertise on your board." It wasn't an apology, but it was an olive branch of sorts, an acknowledgement that what I had built was real and valuable, at least in the terms he understood. "I'll keep that in mind," I replied, recognizing the effort it took for him to make even this small concession. As the conversation wound down and they prepared to leave, James hung back slightly. "I'm sorry it took a national TV appearance to get them here," he said quietly. "But for what it's worth, I think something important shifted today." Looking at my family as they gathered their things, my father examining our industry awards with new interest, my mother straightening her blouse as if preparing to introduce herself as the mother of a successful CEO, and even Eric jotting something in his ever-present notebook, I had to agree. The skepticism wasn't entirely gone, and years of ingrained patterns wouldn't disappear overnight. But something had indeed shifted. For the first time, they were seeing me not as the impractical dreamer who needed guidance back to the safe path, but as a capable entrepreneur who had forged her own path and succeeded. As I walked them to the elevator, I realized that the validation I had sought from them for so long no longer carried the same weight it once had. Their approval, while welcome, was no longer necessary for my sense of accomplishment or self-worth. In proving myself to the world, I had finally, irrevocably, proven myself to myself. 6 months after the unexpected family confrontation in my office, Green Thread had entered a new phase of growth. Our European expansion was proceeding ahead of schedule, with flagship partner stores in London, Paris, and Berlin carrying our collections. The traceability platform had been licensed to 12 other ethical brands, creating a new revenue stream we hadn't initially anticipated. Our proprietary Regan fabric was garnering interest from luxury brands looking to improve their sustainability credentials without sacrificing quality. More surprising than our business expansion was the gradual evolution in my family relationships. The changes weren't dramatic or instantaneous, but they were meaningful. My father had taken to sending me articles about sustainable business practices, each one accompanied by brief messages like, "Thought this might be relevant to what you're doing," or "Is Green Thread implementing something like this?" They weren't always directly applicable to our business model, but the effort to connect with my professional world touched me deeply. My mother had updated all her social media profiles to include Mother of Green Thread CEO Rachel Mitchell in her bios, a public claiming of my success that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. She still occasionally sent me articles about work-life balance or freezing eggs for future family planning, but these now came alongside genuine questions about the business and its challenges. The most significant transformation had occurred with James. After witnessing the confrontation and its aftermath, he had approached me with unexpected interest in the company itself. "I've been thinking about my next career move," he had said during a long phone call. "The military gave me strong logistics experience, and I'm wondering if there might be a place for that in Green Thread's operations." After careful consideration to ensure we were making a business decision, not just a family one, we created a position for him overseeing our increasingly complex global logistics. His military background proved surprisingly valuable in managing our international shipping challenges and multi-facility coordination. Having a family member I actually trusted within the company created a unique support system I hadn't realized I needed. Eric remained the most distant, but even he had shifted from active skepticism to reluctant respect. When Green Thread was featured in a financial publication he regularly read, he had called to ask detailed questions about our profit margins and scaling strategy. It wasn't warmth, exactly, but it was acknowledgement, which felt like progress. As I reflected on this journey from my office overlooking the Seattle skyline, Marcus knocked gently on my open door, interrupting my thoughts. "Ready for dinner?" "The reservation's at 8, he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Just finishing up these European distribution projections," I replied, smiling up at him. The diamond ring on my left hand caught the light as I saved the document, a recent development that had surprised me as much as anyone. After 2 years of supporting each other through business crises, family drama, and personal growth, Marcus had proposed during a weekend hike to the same mountain lookout where we'd had our third date. His proposal had been practical and romantic in equal measure, acknowledging our independent natures while suggesting that we were stronger together than apart, much like our complementary businesses. "I'm not asking you to slow down or change direction," he had said, holding the ring. "I'm asking if I can walk this path with you, wherever it leads." That understanding, that love shouldn't require diminishment of ambition, was exactly what I had always sought but never found until Marcus. As we left the office that evening, I passed the conference room where my family confrontation had taken place 6 months earlier. It now housed our mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from backgrounds similar to mine, people with big ideas but limited support systems. The program, which I had launched in the wake of my television interview, paired promising founders with successful business leaders for guidance, connections, and occasional funding. "Maria's prototype testing went well," Marcus commented, following my gaze toward the conference room where we had met with our latest mentee earlier that day. "Her recycled textile process could be revolutionary if she can scale it." "She reminds me of myself at 25, I admitted. Except she's much further along than I was at her age. That's because she has what you didn't have, someone who's been there before, showing her what's possible. His observation struck me deeply. So much of my struggle had stemmed from navigating uncharted territory alone, fighting not just external business challenges, but the internal doubts planted by years of well-meaning discouragement. Over dinner, our conversation turned to the upcoming family Thanksgiving gathering, the first I had agreed to attend in nearly 2 years. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked, knowing the complicated history of holiday gatherings with my family. I considered the question carefully. Not nervous exactly. Different. I'm coming to it as a different person than I was before, someone who no longer needs their approval but would welcome their support. That's a powerful distinction, he noted. It took me years to understand that seeking validation and building connection are different things. I can have meaningful relationships with my family without requiring them to validate my choices. This realization hadn't come easily. It had required therapy, deep personal reflection, and the supportive community I had built around myself. The friends, mentors, and team members who had believed in me and Greenthread from the beginning had shown me what healthy support looked like, creating a contrast that made my family's doubt patterns more visible. I think the hardest part was recognizing that their doubt came from their own fears, not from any real assessment of my capabilities, I continued, tracing the rim of my water glass. My parents discouraged risk because their experiences taught them that security comes from predictable paths. Eric couldn't validate my success because it challenged his definition of responsible choices. And now? Marcus prompted. Now I can see them more clearly, as people with their own limitations and perspectives, not as the all-knowing authorities I once believed them to be. That's actually made it easier to connect with them authentically. The week after our dinner, I found myself standing on my parents' porch with Marcus beside me and a pie from my favorite Seattle bakery in hand, the same kind I had brought to the disastrous Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. As my mother opened the door, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing us, I felt the full circle moment with startling clarity. "Rachel. And Marcus. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the living room. James was just showing your father how to track that shipment from the Milan factory on his tablet. Eric and Kristen brought the twins. They're getting so big." The home was the same, but my relationship to it had transformed. As I stepped inside, I was no longer the daughter with impractical dreams, but a successful entrepreneur bringing home the partner she loved. Dinner was surprisingly relaxed, with conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. My father asked thoughtful questions about our European expansion. My mother proudly showed Marcus our childhood photo albums. Even Eric engaged in a civil discussion about sustainable business models, though he couldn't resist mentioning that traditional investments still offered more reliable returns. James caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle nod of acknowledgement. We both knew what this gathering represented, not perfect understanding or complete acceptance, but a new foundation built on mutual respect rather than hierarchical judgment. Later that evening, as Marcus and I prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said that day in your office," he admitted, his voice gruff with emotion he rarely displayed. "About security meaning different things to different people. I still worry that's never going to change, but I'm starting to understand that you found your own kind of security. It's just not the kind I recognized." It wasn't an elaborate apology or dramatic reconciliation, but from my practical, stoic father, it was profoundly meaningful. "Thank you, Dad," I said simply, hugging him tightly. As Marcus and I drove back to our hotel, I reflected on the long journey from that lemonade stand at age 7 to a $25 million company changing its industry. The path had been neither straight nor smooth, with family doubt creating some of its steepest obstacles. "You know what I've learned through all of this?" I said to Marcus as the familiar landscape of my hometown passed by our windows. Believing in yourself when no one else does isn't just about stubbornness or proving people wrong. It's about having the courage to listen to your own inner voice when every external voice is telling you to take a different path. "That's wisdom worth sharing," he replied, squeezing my hand. Perhaps that was the most valuable lesson of my journey, that true success isn't measured by valuations or television interviews, but by finding the confidence to chart your own course even when it means sailing against the prevailing winds of doubt. The family validation I had craved for so long was welcome now that it had finally arrived, but I no longer needed it to know my own worth or the value of what I had built. My story isn't unique. Countless entrepreneurs face skepticism from those closest to them, people who love them but cannot understand their vision or appetite for risk. If you're on a similar journey, battling doubt from family members who think you should choose a safer path, remember that their skepticism often says more about their fears than your capabilities. The road of entrepreneurship is hard enough without carrying the weight of others' doubts. Build your support system intentionally, surrounding yourself with people who believe in your vision even when it hits inevitable obstacles. And when success comes, as it often does to those persistent enough to weather the storms, remember to extend grace to those who doubted you, understanding that their fear for you came from love, however misguided. Have you faced doubt from family or friends while pursuing your dreams? How did you maintain your confidence when those closest to you questioned your path? Drop a comment below to share your experience. Your story might be exactly what another dreamer needs to hear today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. We're all on this journey together, and sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer each other is the simple affirmation, I believe in your dream, even when it seems impossible to everyone else. Thank you for joining me on this personal journey from doubt to success. Remember, the most powerful validation isn't the kind that comes from others, it's the kind that blooms within when you stay true to your vision despite the naysayers. Until next time, keep believing, keep building, and keep proving that with enough persistence, the impossible becomes possible.